Everybody knows you never go full retard.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Xaereth Prevails, a Grand Arena story. We're currently in episode 8 of 12 in this current Grand Arena Championships 2, which means that I have 5 total episodes, including this one, to be able to make Kyber. I am undefeated up to this point, and that means that all I need to do is win the next 3, including maybe this one, though there are definitely a lot of challenges, some of them by my opponent and some of them by my own ridiculous lack of preparation. But the first thing I noticed here was Relic 5 General Anakin. And my response at first was,
I'm too old for this shit.
But truly this was kind of a scary matchup. Relic 5 General Anakin is not something I'm necessarily prepared to deal with at this point. I thought that we would have at least one more week to be able to get there. Most people, just for reference, in case people are watching this way in advance, most people only have a 5-star General Anakin, and the people who do have a 5-star General Anakin, a lot of those people haven't geared him yet, including myself. He's only a gear 9, so it's gonna take a little bit of doing to be able to get past that team at the very least, which I was absolutely certain that my opponent would put them on defense somewhere. Looking at the numbers, my opponent and I appeared to be pretty close to even on a lot of things. They had a ton of Relic 3 characters, and otherwise I had them beat in Gear 13. We were even pretty close on Gear 12. They had more Zetas than I did, and they had better mods in general, though we were pretty close on that. If we look at the different records as far as wins go and total rounds cleared, we were very similar, and I knew that my opponent was going to be a really skilled individual. And on top of that, they had Relic 5 General Anakin, so I wasn't necessarily that excited to be able to face it. But you've got to rise to the challenge sometimes, I guess, or you can try to do it anyways. When I first logged in, my opponent had already made most of their attacks and had cleared everyone but my Geonosian team in the back. And we'll go over my defenses a little bit later, but for now we're going to focus on my different offensive teams and what I did to be able to take them out. So they have a Qi'ra team with no nest, Darth Maul team, which is pretty odd, First Order team with Zeta Barris, so I couldn't use Ewoks on it, and then the pretty standard Nightsisters team with a couple relics here and there. Everything was really well modded, so I won't exclaim on that any further. Alright, so I wasn't necessarily that afraid of any of my opponent's frontline teams. I knew that he probably had a pretty loaded back court, and I needed to be able to save a lot of my meta teams for that. But if you watched my most recent episode, you'll know that I failed by using Imperial troopers against Nightsisters, and that's partially, I think, because my mods were like 1 speed off, and so sometimes Death Trooper would go first and sometimes Range Trooper would go first after Stark, so I wanted to avoid the possibility of just failing right out the gate, and so I took Padme here. There weren't any other teams in the front zone that made me really that worried, and so I knew that I would actually have enough teams to be able to take my opponent's backline, even if they had kind of the worst case scenario and had put Darth Revan and General Skywalker in the back. So I decided to use Padme here and just clear it right off the bat. No need to worry about where troopers were going to go, because there were other teams that troopers could counter well here in the front line. So the goal here in this match is just to make sure that you're maximizing banners, and there's not really much you can do, honestly. I do have a Relic 7 Jedi Knight Anakin here, so he absolutely does his job pretty well. He just does his AoE and knocks everyone out, and the people who are left standing I finish off. It's a relatively simple counter, and I'm able to use Zeta Barris against them. I don't need to use C-3PO with this squad, so I was really happy that I was able to get the win here. But it wasn't unexpected. Padme counters the Nightsisters team extremely well. I think the thing that can go worst is the Nightsister Spirit is a lot of times programmed to try to one-shot Ahsoka right away, and I did have a Relic 2 Ahsoka, and I wasn't that concerned, to be honest. That does happen from time to time, though. Not to me, but to others. I've seen it. And so my next match was First Order against First Order. I wanted to be able to clear this zone to see what was in the back zone, so I'd have more information, of course. And this match was actually going to go really well, I thought, because I had First Order Officer who was faster than my opponent's First Order Officer, and that means that you can get the turn meter train going a little bit faster. As you can see, I was pretty eager to be able to put a 2-turn stun on Kylo Ren unmasked, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad choice or a bad sentiment, but I think maybe I could have gone about that a little bit better. If I had given turn meter to the original Kylo Ren, he could have done his AoE first, and once he did his AoE, he would be able to, he'd hand first turn to Kylo Ren unmasked anyways, just because he gives so much turn meter to the whole team. And that would have accomplished a lot of things. I would have been able to get retribution onto original Kylo, so that I could start getting that health immunity down, or healing immunity, I should say. And so here we're just trying to take out all of the outlying pieces. First Order Officer is easy to take out, so you take out him first. Once he's gone, in this particular match, you want to take out First Order Executioner, because he does so much damage and he can really throw off your plans of trying to get max banners. I was lucky up to this point because my First Order Officer had not taken much protection damage, so if I could keep everyone stunned and keep everyone from being able to do a ton of damage to me, I would actually be able to get max banners relatively easily. And First Order Officer is always the one you want to kind of focus on, trying to make sure that his protection is full, because he's the hardest to regenerate. Because you see, you can add a buff from him, and the buff will heal the health and protection of the person who's getting buffed, but he can't buff himself, and so the only way he gets healed is through either getting a buff from the First Order Stormtrooper, or from getting advantage from Kylo Ren's leadership, which is kind of random and not necessarily reliable. And those are only 5% bumps to each health and protection, both times. And so sometimes if he gets hurt, someone punches him for a bunch of damage, you have to get like 16 buffs on him before he's actually at full health and protection. And now the moment of truth. I wanted to see what was in my opponent's back zone, and I was hoping that it wouldn't be both General Anakin and Darth Revan, and so I was pleased to see that it was only General Anakin.
I'm too old for this shit.
So even though I was happy that it wasn't both Darth Revan and General Anakin, which I really had thought might be a possibility, I was still a little bit sad that I was going to have to face General Anakin. But sometimes you just have to step into it. So my next match, I wanted to take troopers and actually make use of them. And so this Qi'ra team really didn't have any teeth. Like, there's nothing in this squad that's hard to take out, honestly. And there's a lot of gear 11 here, and in a gear 13 with relic swirled, this team was not going to be much of a challenge for my troopers, who I do have a couple gear 13 guys in here, and all the rest of them are pretty well modded. So with troopers, you always want to get the first kill, and so Lando had almost no hit points or protection, and so I used a grenade by Death Trooper to take out the taunt on L3, and then my squad proceeded to wipe out the entire team before I could tell you guys the rest of what happened. So not really that much of a threat. You want to take Vander out first, though. So let's go over my pairings and my matchups and all the different things that I was trying to go through when I was approaching the next matchup, which I needed to take out the zMaul team, and I didn't really have any really great options for that. I really didn't want to take troopers because of the days from Maul, and if you get a couple misses, and things can go downhill really quickly in that scenario. And so I used troopers on the Qi'ra team, which is fine, but it meant that I would need to be able to take out the Maul team with one of my remaining kind of B teams. I knew that Commander Luke was going to be earmarked for General Skywalker. I knew that Traya was going to potentially be needed to be able to take out that Jango team with Nest in the back. If my opponent did what I suspected and put Darth Revan in the back corner, then I would need my own Darth Revan to be able to counter that. And if they had General Grievous in the back corner as well, I would need to be able to use my Jedi Revan team to be able to counter that. That meant that I had Ewoks, and I had Phoenix, and I had a Jedi Training Rey team that did not have BB-8 on it. And I I was trying something new. I put BB-8 on defense with General Grievous, and my opponent one-shot that team, of course, and so I was feeling a little bit like I had gone full retard there, and that's not necessarily a place you want to be, but the fact was I needed to pick between Ewoks or Jedi Training Rey or Phoenix to be able to beat this Maul team, and Phoenix just don't have my trust anymore, frankly. They can definitely take out a few random teams here and there. zMaul was just kind of a strange enough team that I didn't really know what I wanted to take against it. It had Droidica and Count Dooku on it, so that meant that Dooku was going to be able to stealth Droidica, and then Maul was going to be able to stealth Dooku and all the other Sith, and I just didn't know if Phoenix were up to all of the madness, and so that's why in the end I decided to go with Jedi Training Rey. Even though I didn't have BB-8, I decided I would take R2 with her, and someone who was able to dispel and hit hard, kind of, and just kind of go with it. I tried to figure out who I should take with the team. Another tank would be nice. There's all kinds of different options available. But in the end, I settled on Ezra because he's available. I never use him for anything anymore, and that's really frustrating. I need to find a good use for him because he has a Zeta, he has Gear 12, and he has some decent mods on him. There's really no reason I shouldn't be using Ezra, except I've been lazy and haven't been trying to figure out a good team for him, so I'm going to have to rectify that at some point. This match is just really awkward. Like, I've never faced a Maul team like this, and not only have I never faced a Maul team like this, but it's just been a really long time since I faced Maul in general, and they don't have like these amazing, crazy, high-end mods. They're all well modded, of course, as I said earlier, but none of them are too crazy. And so I think I made a mistake here early on with R2. The whole reason you want R2 against zMaul is he sets people on fire, and setting people on fire is great because they can't get the evasion bonus from the zMaul lead, and that's really like part of the charm or the allure of this squad with zMaul is sometimes RNG can just really screw with you, and if you miss enough shots in a row, enough hits, then you can just kind of lose right away. And one thing I wasn't really expecting was the Droidica to be able to focus Fire Finn off the board quite so quickly. I knew that it was coming, and I was just really glad that he hadn't chosen to focus on Jedi Training Rey, because if he had, that might have gone really south really fast. As it stands, this was not an ideal situation. Everyone's popping in and out of stealth, and every time they do that, they're healing themselves, they're making themselves unavailable for me to be able to focus fire on them. And I'm just telling you guys what the zMaul meta was, basically. Like, they had a lot of really frustrating mechanics to them, and that's why the developers actually designed R2-D2. Like, that they explicitly explained that at one point in some kind of interview, that we're just trying to make the dodge meta go away, and therefore we're going to give R2 something that can set everyone on fire and make everyone stop being able to dodge everything. And it effectively killed the Maul meta. It took a little bit, but it did happen. And after that, we haven't really seen Maul that much, but here it really kind of threw a wrench in my plans. Like, it was a pretty tricky team, and I think this problem wouldn't have really been a thing at all if I had had BB-8 available instead of kind of crappy Ezra. Ezra's not the best in this setting, really. He's good in a lot of ways, but he's not ideal with a bunch of resistance guys. So 52 banners. I got the win on my first try, and I felt like the game was mocking me because it put me in a Rhodium League right then, like right after my biggest struggle attack. But in the end, I got a win on my first try, and I'm going to really need to figure out what I want to do with BB-8 in the future in the Jedi Training Rey squad. They're just too vital for my offense right now. They're too much of a crutch. I need to figure out something to do with them. Alright, so it was great news. My opponent had not put Darth Revan in the back zone like I had predicted. I had feared that. The fact that my opponent had failed an attack on my Geonosian squad had made me think that maybe they just hadn't had Darth Revan available to be able to take out an extra team. But usually once someone's put Darth Revan on their offense, that means I'm going to get full cleared. That's almost always the result, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But the end result was there was a Carth team with Wampa in the back, and then this General Grievous squad with extremely high relics and a ton of health. It was a pretty scary thing, but I was pretty confident walking into this just because I knew that my Jedi Knight Revan could take on a squad with General Grievous, even at Relic 7, even with other high relics. And I could do it relatively easily. Like that has happened consistently. And so I jumped into this. I'd put, I have Relic 4 level on Grandmaster Yoda, Relic 3 on Jolee, or maybe it's reversed. I don't really actually remember. But going into this match, you want to take out B2 first. Like, that needs to be your target priority. And once you do that, then you want to just kind of stick around as much as you can and not kill anyone else. Unfortunately, my opponent had put his Magna Guard in there without much protection or health, or maybe I was just hitting too hard because Yoda is really strong now. But one way or another, I killed Magna Guard way too early, and that led to me getting Revan just focus fired off the board by General Grievous. And that's obviously not the result you want. Luckily, Jolee was available to give the revive, which is always helpful, of course. And now we're just trying to wait for Jedi Revan to be able to get his mark back up so that General Grievous can be marked, and then we can just take him out. Again, unfortunately, my Revan got taken out, and this was a real problem because I really needed that mark to go on General Grievous. If I went and killed B1 and Newt like I wanted to, General Grievous would be able to just AoE me off the table completely. And so I decided that I was just going to get as many punches in with Jolee as I could. If Jolee was able to get enough hits in, then every time he hits something, his cooldowns reduce, and then he'd be able to hopefully and theoretically revive himself, or not himself, but he'd be able to revive Revan and Hermit Yoda, and all would be well. And so here that plan did work. Both of those guys got revived. Wonderful. And now B1 is out of the picture. I needed to be real careful not to take Newt out yet because I now wanted to make sure that General Grievous was not going to be able to get another huge AoE off. And so Jolee came through in the clutch for me again, reviving Jedi Revan a second time. But then I was a little bit dumb once again and did an AoE with Grandmaster Yoda, which then killed Newt, and that killing of Newt then triggered another AoE from General Grievous that almost ended me. I don't know how he didn't just completely kill me by now, because he's had so many turns, he's gained so much extra health that he's doing an obscene amount of damage. And so we're really just trying to finish him off as fast as we can. He survived his initial marking, which is really frustrating. And then once again, my Jedi Revan got taken out, and he just keeps dying and dying. And luckily, I was able to finish General Grievous off. And then Jolee had gotten enough assists in that he was able to revive Revan a third time, and I escaped this match with 55. This was such a close match. I think that Newt probably played a way bigger role than it looks like there. I also think that the fact that my Jedi Revan died so much means that I'm going to need to put a little bit more survivability on him. But the fact is, I won that match without failing, and that was huge because I needed that to be able to focus on the rest of the squads. Now, perhaps conventional wisdom would say that I needed to full clear that last zone before I went in on General Skywalker, because my opponent had failed 2 attacks on my Geonosians and then just left them alone, and they had also failed an attack on my clones, which led me to believe that they probably just didn't have any teams that could take out my Geonosians. That meant that I was able to guarantee, basically, being able to counter the other teams with my remaining meta teams, and I wanted to try Commander Luke against this General Skywalker team because I wanted to be able to save my Darth Revan team and potentially get Malak in on the action of cleaning up these clones. And so I wanted to try to take out as many clones as I could. I realized that maybe I wouldn't be able to take out General Skywalker on my own. One thing I wanted to note was General Skywalker was only Gear 12. He didn't have Relic 5 the way my opponent's profile had read, and that was huge for being able to make me counter this team at all. One thing I also want to note is that I was extraordinarily stupid and took Thrawn with this team, which Thrawn isn't necessarily bad on his own, but Thrawn took guard away from Commander Luke, and having guard on Commander Luke is kind of essential. Like, you need that, and the fact that I didn't get that, I don't know how much it shaped the outcome of this battle. I feel like it did a lot, but who knows. At any rate, Thrawn was just kind of like standing around with guard, and I guess that adds to his survivability, but as you can see, he hasn't really been hit that much anyways. I was able to get the topple off on Anakin one more time, and at this point, I just wanted to be able to clear out the remaining clones. Like, if I could do that, then I might be able to just finish General Skywalker on his own. And of course, I would try to take him out anyways, but I didn't have a ton of hope. Like, he's just built really strong. Like, he's already at full health and protection because of the way his topple thing works. And I knew that Han, once Chewie was taken away from him, he would just probably get taken out. So Thrawn shot one last shot of defiance in Skywalker's face, and Skywalker killed him for it. So got a loss in, but all that's left is that guy. And, I thought that I would probably be able to counter him. So after that match was over with, I wanted to go back and make sure that I used all the teams that I needed to be able to take out the Carth team with Wampa. Initially I wanted to just use Phoenix to be able to take this squad out, but then I realized that Wampa eats Phoenix, and I just didn't want that headache. I didn't want any more fails. I had already failed once against General Skywalker, and that meant that if my opponent was able to full clear me, he was still in the running to be able to retake the match against me. And so I decided to take Darth Revan here against Carth and Wampa, which seems like a ridiculous overkill, I realize, but I wanted to maximize my banners here and get an undersized win. And then you'll see that Malak isn't here, and Malak is obviously, he's really strong, he's a good character, and I wanted to use him as a potential foil for taking out that General Skywalker team. So that's, it may seem a little backwards to use my best team on the worst remaining team, but I knew that Traya had the other matchup locked down, like being able to counter Jango, and company is pretty easy for her, I felt, and so I decided to go with that. And so Jedi, or Darth Revan, is the one that's left. I didn't really trust Malak to be able to fully counter this team on his own, and I wanted to be able to try some things against General Skywalker. So I suspected that my opponent was going to end up not being able to full clear me, but I wanted to give myself every chance to do that, and that meant clearing that Carth team, and then clearing the Jango team with Traya, and then I would have Malak plus all my B and C list teams to hopefully be able to pull out the win. So obviously I wanted to take Traya here, as I previously stated, and one thing I hadn't looked at was all my opponent's speed mods and all of that stuff. I had looked and seen that Bosk was, of course, really fast, and then otherwise there wasn't really a whole lot that I was looking at, and I think that was a mistake. My opponent actually had some really high offensive numbers. They were able to do a lot of damage to me. They took a ton of turns, and that's obviously not necessarily ideal. You want to limit all of that. And my Traya squad isn't poorly modded at all. Scion is actually Gear 13 right now with Relic 1, and the rest are all Gear 12 plus 5, and except for Trooper, I think he's like Gear 12 plus 3, because I hate the idea of putting like damage gear on him, because that is just kind of a waste, and you don't necessarily need more speed. And so if you don't want to get him to gear 13, there's not much point, which I'll probably have to rectify eventually here, but I'm not getting many turns, as you can see, and this fight actually turned into kind of a fiasco for a while. The first bad thing that happened was that Sith Trooper was just losing life, just hemorrhaging life, and even though he has a ton of good health and defense protective mods, it didn't save him. And immediately I was like, oh, I'm vulnerable here now. My tank is gone. Scion is clearly not taunting that much. They're not hitting him very much at all, and I need to do something. I need to be able to, rectify the situation. And even though Boba was gone and now Nest was annihilated, Scion finally had his double life buff, so that was nice. They're still able to do a lot of damage, and you can see they all have their bounty hunter resolve up, and Jango was just doing some amazingly hard hits. Like, I'm very impressed by my opponent's Jango. I don't know if he specially modded him for all of this madness or what, but you can see that they took out Traya just on their own, and Jango managed to be the one who hit, so he got his bounty hunter's resolve back. And I was immediately worried because if you keep Nihilus stunned, he can't actually annihilate anything. Like, he doesn't have anything that can dispel that stun anymore, and so it's pretty nerve-wracking to think that all of your hopes revolve completely around a guy who can just be stun locked by a few different sources, by both Bossk and by Dengar. Luckily, I was able to dodge that and annihilate Jango, after which now it's just Bossk and Dengar, and we just have to make sure that the clock doesn't wind down. There's really nothing scary about these two in terms of like threatening the rest of my squad, but once again, like this bounty hunter team really did a lot of good work on my Sith. Like, I at some point was thinking like, well, I don't know what's gonna happen. Like, what if I lose this? If I lose this, like, how can I recover from it? And luckily, it didn't come to that. I'm clearly not going to get very many banners off of this attack, but it is still an understrength win. And you can see when I attacked Dengar earlier, he actually came back because he had Bounty Hunter's Resolve from Jango's lead, which you don't really see that often. But I got 52 banners, which seems like more than I deserved, frankly. This match was a pretty rough one for me in terms of banners efficiency. Like, I didn't fail a whole lot of attacks, but I definitely scraped the bottom of the barrel a little bit in terms of my level of effort and ability to win. Alright, so I was ahead in the match. I had more banners at this point than my opponent had gotten at this point, and so if my opponent wasn't able to full clear my Geonosians, then I would win. However, you never know. Like, you may have some kind of a flash of inspiration, or your opponent might say, oh yeah, I never tried my Emperor Palpatine team. I forgot that he was on offense, and I'm going to try that. And so I just decided that I needed to do everything I could. I would try to take out Skywalker as best I could. Now, I did up the points, and I discovered that regardless of how poorly I did, if I could beat Skywalker at all, then I would be able to win. Like, it didn't matter how few banners I did, so I decided I wanted to try Phoenix first, just to see if they would be able to, like, kind of drag him down the same way they drag down Grievous, or a lot of, they even drag down Malak in a lot of circumstances. And so I decided, even if they failed, that they'd been making life so rough for me lately that they kind of deserve this untimely demise. So they actually held their ground pretty well here for a while, and they were taking him down. However, every time he hits, he's regenerating a ton of health, and right here was my best attempt. It was really close. Well, not really close. It wasn't in the red, but Sabine. Oh, there we go. Zeb actually almost took him out just on his own with his special, with his Zeta and everything. Wonderful attempt, not quite enough. And now there's just no way. I don't have really the momentum to be able to do this. What I probably should have done was just let the clock run out and start Skywalker at half health, but I didn't do that, so I lost, and Phoenix added to the defense counters and did very little other than to give my opponent a little bit of an ego boost. And now I decided I didn't really have any more teams remaining. I had Ewoks, which were pretty clearly not going to work against this. If I had had like C-3PO or something, but instead I decided I would just try Rogue One and Malak combined. So there's like no subtlety other than I'm just trying to get, some debuffs on General Anakin. I couldn't remember what debuffs I needed to get on him, or that he would even be allowed to apply. But I did know that Rogue One had some interesting things, like they had a good tank. Qi'ra is good at providing tenacity up, so that I couldn't be debuffed. He was able to heal. Jin could revive a couple of them. And then I took Droidica just because I had him, and I decided it would be fun to kill Skywalker a second time after I unlocked him with Droidica. It would be fun to kill him again with Droidica. I don't know. There just didn't seem to be any other characters that fit the mold that well. And so I don't know if Droidica is a waste here or not. I figured also, though, if he could get his shield up, then Anakin could maybe try to hit him a little bit and wouldn't actually be able to do much. And here, the match was actually over really fast. He kept hitting Malak, and then Malak eventually, like, after he feared Skywalker a few times, then he was able to get his force drain up, and Skywalker was in range to be able to be hit by that, and so he was taken out. And I managed to scrape by a bottom of the barrel win with 1865 banners.
I'm too old for this shit.
My normal goal is to get 1910, so pretty far short of that goal. You can look at my defenses now for a minute. My Jango squad and my Palpatine squad were both one shot, and that usually is the result. My Nest squad with Newt and Watt got taken out, as did my Qi'ra Wampa team. And the General Grievous team, as you can see, with BB-8, just happy as can be, hanging out there on top. And they got one shot as well, so did Asajj, but then the clones ended up beating Commander Luke, according to my opponent, and then my opponent didn't have enough teams to be able to deal with the rest of this, and so I did barely squeak by with a win here. It was a really close run thing, though, and if my opponent had been able to full clear me, it would have been a totally different matter. I think that, maybe I still would have won. I don't really know. I had pretty much hemorrhaged a lot of different points on different squads, and I definitely need to make sure that I have some kind of use for Jedi Training Rey if I'm going to keep BB-8 on that squad. I talked to my opponent after the match, and he said that the General Grievous squad was actually really close to being able to beat him, and BB-8 really messed with his ability to do that, and he even had to revive some of his guys, which sounded familiar to me. And I thought that it was just really interesting. He said that if my General Grievous hadn't been Relic level 1, I probably would have been able to beat him. Not Relic 1 as in, also probably not Relic 2. I think my opponent said like Relic 5, though I'm sure that was an estimate. Anyways, it was a really good match, and it was good experience against General Skywalker. I don't really want to face him again for a while. I would really wish that I was able to have a Gear 12 or 13 General Skywalker myself, and eventually I will. So anyways, guys, thanks so much for watching. Stay tuned for the finals. That's going to be crazy. My opponent has some ridiculously fast mods. And remember that in all things, Xaereth prevails.